Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining me this week on Newsmakers. Our focus this week is Missouri Southern State University. And of course, as you know, many faculty members spend a lot of time in the classroom, but many of them spend time outside of the classroom doing research. And joining me today is someone who's done a lot of research. We're focusing on Kyle Gustafson with the Biology Department. Thank you for being here today.
I'm happy to be here.
And I know that a lot of research that you have done, we're going to talk about that today, but I want to start off with a little basic information. You work for the Biology Department here at Missouri Southern.
Yes, I'm an assistant professor in the Biology and Environmental Health Department.
Okay. Not to mention, a lot of people do work outside as a faculty member, and you did some research that tied into mountain lions in California. So that's going to be our focus today. People probably, first question they may ask is, how did you get involved with research in California?
Sure. And it doesn't make any sense, really. After my PhD, I had gained a bunch of experience working on genetics of various animals, mostly parasites, but I was really interested in working with wildlife. And I applied for a postdoc at the University of Wyoming, and they said there'd be potential to work on carnivores, but I didn't realize I'd move to Wyoming to work on carnivores in another state altogether. And so the project ended up being the population genetics of California mountain lions, as well as ferrets and black bears and hummingbirds, just a ton of species. But today we're talking about mountain lions.
Yeah. Right. And really it sounds like when you're talking about working in a project in another state, there are no state lines when it comes to research. You're working on national, sometimes international concerns.
Right, right. But I will say, legally, there are state lines.
Some lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And you can't really transport these things across state lines. But yeah, I'm working with people from really all over the world, but most of the people I'm working with are stationed out of California, either through the government agencies, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, various universities, nonprofit organizations, even public landowners. Almost everyone's interested in the mountain lions in the state.
So how long has the mountain lion project been going on in California?
The mountain lion project started before I was born, so it's been going on for 30-some years. The data's been in collection since the 80s, and it's only until basically when I showed up in the lab at 2016, everything was in the right place at the right time, and everything was ready to be analyzed, and that was really my role in the project.
So a lot of people working behind the scenes doing their hands-on work. I imagine in the field a lot of work before you got to that point.
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you who all the people were. There's probably been hundreds of people working on the project, either in the field, collecting samples, collaring these animals. There's tons of vets working to extract blood and understand the viruses and diseases. And then we get some genetic samples from people out of different labs, and all that came together, and I did the genetics project on those mountain lions.
Well, I know the video that we'll be seeing in a moment, you have some comments that you make in there about the fact, the genetic implications, but people want to perhaps, before we show the video, why the concern about mountain lions? Can you kind of in a nutshell tell people why was there concern about this?
Sure. So historically, mountain lions, it was thought had a wide-ranging population all through North America, including the United States, and then they were reduced to an extremely small population, recolonized from Central America, and with an event like that, that's called a bottleneck or a founder event, where a population starts big, it becomes very small, loses a bunch of its genetic diversity, or a new population is introduced, and it's a very small population that expands, but still it started from a small amount of genetic diversity. And so typically that's not good for wildlife populations, but then on top of that, now they have to deal with all the human infrastructure, and especially in California, around Los Angeles, San Diego, Santa Cruz region, very intense industrialization, lots of highways, which we didn't know was going to be as big of a factor as it is. But basically, some of these mountain lion populations are so isolated that they're starting to inbreed.
So basically, people are living on the lands where the mountain lions were native to, and then infringing on their lands.
Exactly.
Right. Well, let's take a look at the video. I know that it's about 11 minutes long. Let our audience get a feel for this is kind of the last part of the project, as you say, the environmental project.
Sure.
Okay, so let's pause and let the audience take a look at that video.
Connection, a word with many meanings. As human beings, we connect to our friends our family, our community. Instinctively, we nurture these connections to build happy and meaningful lives. In California, several mountain lion populations are separated by a force greater than themselves. Lacking connection and genetic diversity, they face not only isolation, but also extinction.
The mountain lions in California can exist in the high desert, the low desert, the edge of the coast, mountains, the high mountains, up in the snow. So they're extremely versatile. And some of that versatility comes from their willingness to go from one prey type to another.
As a highly adaptable species, mountain lions can live wherever there are adequate resources. However, in some areas of California, their will to adapt simply isn't enough.
Mountain lions need to migrate in order to have genetic diversity. And genetic diversity provides a greater likelihood of resistance to disease. It provides a greater likelihood of overall fitness for survival.
Mountain lions will disperse from their mother's territory after 1 to 2 years of age, ready to establish their own homes, which can be as large as 90 square miles for females and 300 for males.
Because they require huge amounts of space, they occur at relatively low densities, and they're one of the first species to really be affected by urbanization and urban sprawl, because they require so much space.
The biggest threat of the human population growth in California to the mountain lion and other wildlife is loss of habitat and loss of connectivity between habitat patches. In other words, it's really hard to get across our roads and freeways.
Occasionally, a large natural structure such as a river or valley will limit gene flow among populations, but not to the extent we are observing in California.
The absence of connectivity between certain habitats has led to 10 genetically distinct subpopulations of lions in California.
When you look at the genetics of animals throughout the state, as you see which populations are sort of more threatened than others and how populations are clustered according to geographic features and highways.
Scientists are now predicting local extinctions of some of these genetically inbred populations within the next 50 years if humans don't do anything to facilitate gene flow.
Specifically, these 6 populations are surrounded by highways and human development, making migration nearly impossible and ultimately leading to inbreeding depression.
This is when the genetics of a population becomes so limited that rare genetic mutations come together in a homozygous state and produce abnormal physical characteristics. When this occurs at the population level, the populations can no longer sustain themselves. The mountain lion populations in and around Los Angeles, San Diego, and Santa Cruz appear to be at the highest risk.
In our study area in Southern California, the Santa Ana Mountains population is very squeezed by Interstate 15, really between Interstate 15 and the ocean, and development on the north and the south.
Specifically looking at Southern California, the Santa Monica Mountains are isolated from the Santa Ana Mountains, which are isolated from the Peninsular Mountains by freeways.
Further east lie the San Bernardino and Eastern Peninsula populations, which are separated by the I-10 freeway, development, and the desert.
Our main study area is in the Santa Monica Mountains, adjacent to LA. It's roughly 300 square miles. You can think of it as this island of habitat, bordered on the south by the Pacific Ocean, to the east by LA, to the north by major freeways and development. The west has agricultural fields. So it's this island of habitat, completely surrounded by development and freeways.
What the 101 did in development in the area is, for the first time, cut the Santa Monica Mountains off from the rest of the world. And 10 lanes of freeway is an impenetrable barrier. So what you have is the population of mountain lions south of the 101 can't get out. Most of them die trying.
Both of our populations have recorded some of the lowest genetic diversity ever recorded outside that of the Florida panther that went nearly extinct.
This habitat fragmentation is all over the state. Interstate 5 is a huge barrier between the Central Coast population and those in the Sierra Nevadas.
Our study area is the Santa Cruz Mountains, basically the mountain range that's bounded by San Francisco to the north, the Silicon Valley to the east. And Highway 17 bisects the Santa Cruz Mountains, and Highway 101 sort of forms a ring around it.
It may look like these lions are doomed, but there is hope. Several organizations are working towards reconnecting these wild places. One of their key challenges is acquiring the land on either side of the highway.
The reserve was established in 1962, and the mission of the reserve is conservation, preservation of biodiversity, and habitat connectivity. And so we play an important role as a linkage between the Santa Ana Mountains and the Palomar Mountains. We're not set up to do recreation. We're not a park of any kind. We're set aside as conservation, set aside as habitat connection.
Now that we've secured key parcels right at the I-15, we're working with UC Davis, who is doing more direct studies to evaluate what types of crossing structures can be installed along the highway to allow safe passage for mountain lions, deer, and other wildlife.
UC Davis is working with engineering faculty and students from Cal Poly Pomona to design crossing structures along I-15.
So it's got benefit all the way around, and we feel like it's well worth it, especially since those structures can last for many decades. So we're very excited about working with engineers and students at engineering schools to provide them with the exposure and the opportunity to work on these kinds of projects that benefit wildlife and not just cars.
Additionally, specially designed fencing along highways helps direct wildlife to safe crossing points and away from the roads. This has already shown positive results. On Route 241, wildlife casualties have dropped by 98%, making the roads safer for both humans and animals. In the Santa Monica Mountains, efforts to reconnect the natural habitat involve multiple partnerships.
Working on this campaign now to build a vegetated wildlife bridge over the 101 in the vicinity of Liberty Canyon, which is one of our last remaining spots in the mountains that has natural protected habitat on both ends.
Building the largest wildlife crossing in the world and also trying to save this population of mountain lions, it is all about partnerships and collaboration. And you know, one of the things I love about this campaign as well, and the quest to do this, is everybody's a partner, including the public. The public support for this is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it.
In the Santa Cruz Mountains, researchers are also looking for ways to link lion populations.
There's plans now for 2 tunnels to go across Highway 17, one sort of on the southern Santa Cruz County side and the other on the Santa Clara side of the mountains. These are 2 places where our data has shown are important for mountain lions crossing. And now we're working on what is arguably the bigger problem, and that is isolation from the Santa Cruz Mountains to neighboring ranges.
If linking local populations is the first step, the next step is connecting lions statewide.
Not only are these wildlife crossing structures of these highways going to make it sure that wildlife can safely cross these highways, but it'll also ensure that there are less human-wildlife collisions on the highways.
It really behooves all of us to focus on solving the problem of wildlife being killed as part of our transportation infrastructure.
We really want to live in an environment where all the pieces are in place and they're all doing their job. And so we don't want you know, the connectivity between these populations isn't just about mountain lions. It's about all the animals that are going to use these underpasses, these overpasses, these ways around a deadly freeway. I think we need to remember that as humans, we're not exempt from changes in our environment.
Connection truly is a word with many meanings, and to humans and mountain lions alike, it is an essential aspect of survival. As we begin to understand the importance of connectivity, we can take strides to reconnect isolated spaces. So thank you for watching this series and bringing awareness to this conflict. By connecting and collaborating with others, we all can ensure the survival of California mountain lions.
As you can see by the video, a lot of work, a lot of researchers involved. What would you say was the ultimate goal of this project, trying to put everyone together like this?
The ultimate goal of any statewide project like that, it's really a simple question, and that is, where are the populations? And first of all, are there populations, or is it one big population? And we definitely found lots of populations, but the other is, what is their genetic health? So do they have a lot of heterozygosity? Do they have lots of alleles, a lot of genetics? Or are they coming together in a homozygous state and starting to inbreed? Because inbreeding leads to a lot of phenotypic problems, or morphological problems, physiological problems. With mountain lions, we see kinked tails as a sign. They'll have mutated sperm. And then they enter what's called an extinction vortex, where not only is their population small, but their genetic diversity is even smaller, and they can't really come back from that. And so they're just
kind of spirals down?
Yeah, they spiral into extinction.
Right. So would you say the final, or not say the final, results so far from the study that have shown that those are legitimate concerns there in California with those populations?
Yeah, and I'm working with some other people doing some modeling, some population viability analyses, and it's a fancy way to say, will the population survive?
Right.
And they're incorporating their biological information, so birth rates, death rates, and stuff like that with the genetics now. And they've identified at least 2 populations in California that are expected to go extinct in our lifetime, just because of their isolation and inbreeding.
Now in that video we did see some scenes where they have constructed some overpasses on highways to try to encourage, I guess, the animals to cross over the highways they know otherwise could not cross. Is that one aspect of how people are trying to help or assist these animals?
Yeah, so the development is definitely not going to slow down in California. There's a lot of people that would like it to be minimized, but really what they have to do in that state is provide opportunities for wildlife in conjunction with new development. And so currently they're trying to build the world's largest land bridge in and out of the Santa Monica Mountains to provide mountain lions opportunities to migrate in and migrate out.
So in reality, it's kind of, we have to coexist with the people who are there.
Yes,
and try
exactly.
to put that together. Well, let's bring this back to Missouri, and in the classroom at Missouri Southern, some of our viewers might be curious, how are you able to take these experiences and the work you're doing and share it with your students?
Well, as a population geneticist, it just so happens I teach the genetics course, and so every semester I teach my students about the population genetics theory, but then I also supply them these real life stories, specifically these mountain lion stories, to get them thinking about how this actually happens in nature and human impacts on wildlife, and ultimately seeing that it's humans that have to circumvent those problems as well.
So do you have that interest in your students to then go on and do their own research into these types of areas? Maybe not the mountain lions, but other types of species and animals?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of different interests in population genetics of mammals, and parasitology, which is the study of parasites, and toxicology, the study of how toxicants affect organisms. And when I bring a student into my lab to do research, I really ask them what their interests are, what they plan to do with their future, and then we try to tailor a project specific to them. Okay. And it has to be something I'm at least familiar with, so I can help them, but for the most part, I tailor these projects to the students themselves. So
you currently have some students here at Missouri Southern as undergraduates who are helping with research projects, or doing their own research projects.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got 5 this semester. I had 1 graduate last semester. He was working on how heavy metals and move up through food chains, through snails, because they build their shells out of calcium, typically calcium ions, but they replace that with metal ions. And there's been a lot of mining in the area, zinc and lead. And now I've got a student working on turkey parasites, some other students working on the genetics of snails and parasites as well.
So they're able to localize these concerns, what's happening here in Southwest Missouri or within this region.
Yeah, I'm really interested in applying these things directly to the region I live in primarily. Yeah.
What about your role in research? I know being full-time faculty members, a lot of hours involved in just the teaching, but are you able to still find time to continue your research interests?
Primarily during the school year, I'm working on student projects. I'm not really doing my own research at the time. I suppose I could, but then I'd have to take much fewer students.
Right.
And it's really about the students here at Missouri Southern. I do try to do as much as I can during the summer and then over Christmas break as well.
So do you have a current project that you're pursuing this year?
Yeah, I've got 2 or 3 going. It always seems like I have more projects than I have time for.
Right.
I'm working on statewide analysis of genetics of snails. I'm working on population genomics. It's the next level of research in California still. I'm also working on the genetics of black bears, trying to estimate how many black bears there are in the state. That's in California as well, so not in Missouri specifically.
Right.
But hopefully we can extend it there as well.
But we've heard in Missouri about the growing black bear population, so there's probably an interest in this.
Oh, I'm sure there are, and I've been in contact with some of the state biologists as well.
So the students who are doing the research with you, what are some examples of where they go on for their careers? Or they go on to graduate school or medical school? What kind of research do they carry through from there?
Well, it's only my 3rd semester, so I've only had 1 student graduate out of my lab so far, and he's really interested in wildlife conservation and land management. And I took him to a scientific conference this last semester. He made some really good connections, and he's currently applying for positions with the the MDC, Missouri Department of Conservation. And I've got several students interested in going to medical school, several interested in graduate school, but we haven't graduated
They're
yet.
still in school,
so,
right?
Right. They're still learning how to become a scientist.
But that research aspect of being a student at Missouri Southern, and they're not only able to share with the other students and faculty here on campus, going to those professional development or type of seminars, it really helps them when they're able to see.
Yeah, so I try to get them as involved as I can in the Missouri Research Symposium, but I try to get them outside to experience a real scientific setting as well, such as regional or national conferences. And that's really where they make those networking connections that they would otherwise never experience.
Right. So they're going to meet those people who have those projects that they're wanting to work with in the future and carry for them. Well, what do you find the best part, or the most exciting part of doing this type of research? I guess it's kind of like being a detective in many cases. You know?
Yeah. So my research specifically, I'm just really interested in the animals and in genetics and where we can take the field and develop it. As far as the students go, I'm really interested in just seeing them develop. So you can have a classroom setting and they can learn a lot of facts, but giving them a research project just transforms the way they think. And you can see a student grow exponentially with their knowledge of biology and science.
Are there certain skills that you encourage students, or traits you look for in a student who wants to do research?
Absolutely. One is reading. We're all in college here, at least my students are.
Right.
The ones that really succeed are the ones who will sit down and read. And it doesn't matter what you're reading, as long as you're reading, you're learning something.
Expanding your brain.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And so those students who could, well, here's an example. One of my students asked me, how many citations do I need? And I told her, I said, all of them. And her head just lit up, like, what do you mean all of them? I'm like, you have to become the expert now. And so she came back and read 40 or 50 papers, and that just transforms the way a person thinks about the world.
Right. And really probably exposes them to so much more they never even dreamed of even existing in many cases.
Oh yeah, especially with parasites, most people know what a turkey is, but you'd never know what a nematode is living inside of a turkey, or maybe a tapeworm. You've heard of it, but
Right.
here she is interacting with these organisms and seeing just how real they are, understanding their life cycles and the diseases they can cause.
So your students are able to learn through these professional journals and other people's research to then carry through with what they're doing and specifying their specific area of interest.
Yeah, sometimes they have to specifically read a specific article that they can then apply to their project.
Right.
And that's not something I can teach them to do. They have to do that themselves, and I facilitate that.
So they take the initiative to go out and find out that information.
They have to take initiative, or it just won't get done. That's why it's their research project.
Right. So would you say that's one of the big draws for students wanting to come into especially the biology area here at Missouri Southern, that opportunity to do that? We talk a lot about opportunities at the college level.
Yeah, our department's really developing in the research area, a research focus, and we've got a few faculty who are very active in research, and we can definitely see the students benefiting. Not only are they learning themselves, but they're communicating with each other, and they're learning a lot from each other about science, about being biologists.
And it sounds like it's really a lot of, as we said at the beginning, collaborative efforts, that it's not just one person doing the work, it takes a team to do many of these things.
It does, yeah, especially large-scale research projects.
Together. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for sharing with our audience today, and I hope they enjoyed the opportunity to see the video that you had and give them a little more information. And thank you for being here today.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.